Every legend is built. This one starts with a frame. We raised a great stature and gave it a name. The BMW X7. It's the biggest one yet. Fitting power and style, the best you can get. An all-leather interior, its luxury shows. So we kept it right up for all of 3 rows. With its dynamic driving, you chase your desires. The true mark of this legend is how it inspires. The first ever BMW X7. Make every day legendary.
Exceptional offers through BMW Financial Services at bmwnyc.com. BMW of Manhattan, driven by more.
Welcome to Audiogyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Aziz Kachwalla with us on Audiogyan. Aziz studied to be a product designer from NID Ahmedabad after graduating with B.Tech degree in civil engineering from IIT Mumbai. With over 2 decades of experience in exhibition, lighting, retail and furniture design. The Orange Company is his design consultancy firm that does large multi-disciplinary interior architectural projects. His design studio is located in Mazagaon in South Mumbai and his workshop is called At 10. Thank you, Aziz sir, for giving us your time, and it's a real honor to have you on Audiogyan. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I've done a couple of interviews previously with furniture designers and designers who build real life products. And this I wanted to slightly understand more about material and especially some bits of ply which you have worked on. So I've come up with few questions and let's see how you want to, you can just take it forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first thing which I want to ask you...
So Kedar, just one correction.
Yeah.
You mentioned that my workshop is called At 10. It's actually not At 10.
Okay.
It's called Atin.
Oh.
Atin is actually an Arabic word.
Okay.
It means the fig tree. Fig as in F-I-G, fig tree.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We are located in an area called Old Anjeer Wadi. And Anjeer being fig, Anjeer Wadi was actually a fig orchard once upon a time in Mazagaon.
Oh, nice.
So we use that particular word to name the studio. Also, it sounds a little bit unusual. And there's always a talking point when people call it Atin. And actually it's not Atin at all. It's Atin.
Atin. Interesting. So to begin with, what are your observations while playing with other materials? We'll come to ply, but you have been dealing with different kinds of materials, right? So if you can start off by just setting some context as to what characteristics or take up any particular case study which you have worked on, and just if you can tell us what does material as a word mean to you, and philosophically obviously, and more about it.
Well, I think that's the core building block of a product. I mean, the material has to be there. Everything is materialistic in that sense. The moment you talk about the product, you talk about material. So material becomes a very important factor. And the right choice of material for a particular product becomes extremely important. So it's not just a question about that you use one particular material or the other. It's necessarily about what suits that particular product. And what do you intend to achieve with that particular product, which decides the choice of the material.
So if any example, like probably one of the work which you have done, and how did that process happen, and what was the process while selecting the material, or what was the brief like, or it could be a self-commissioned work also. So if you can just tell us about that.
So we recently did a project with a company called Jaipur Jewels, who were looking for knockdown display cases for the jewelry, because they do a lot of exhibitions across the country, which are like traveling exhibitions. They would go to a particular place, exhibit their products for 2 or 3 days, and then the jewelry and the cases would have to be repacked and got back again. They're based in Bombay. So for that, we realized that what was required was visibility, and what was required was also durability. So we are looking for a transparent material. And,
visibility in the sense what is inside, or
correct, exactly.
Okay.
Because these are display cases. The jewelry is it's showcased within that particular case. So we could have used, say, maybe a clear plastic like acrylic. But over a longer duration, it wouldn't have been suitable because acrylic is prone to scratches, handling, and things like that. So, the right choice for that, according to us, was glass. Although glass is much heavier than acrylic, and it makes the cases much more heavier. But nevertheless, given the context and the situation, I think glass was the right material to use. So I mean, that's what it involves. Like, you look at the particular context, you look at the product, you see how it is going to be used, you see what is the life cycle of that product, for how long, and in what way it's going to be used. Also, that becomes important. And then you choose the material according to that.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I would slightly get into this particular thing again. So, what was the process? Because you are doing a trade-off here, because there's a scratch prone material versus this, but there's a weight also. So how was the trade-off communicated?
No, so we basically, then it involves a discussion with the client, and you have to make the client aware of the fact that, why you're choosing a particular material, why are you recommending a particular material. So in this particular case, it was a question of convincing the client that this was the right choice, given the situation. Mm-hmm. So although, there is a trade-off over there, but then, I wouldn't call it a trade-off. It's not really a trade-off.
Okay.
So although the weight of the glass is heavier than that of acrylic, but still the context demands that we use glass. Mm-hmm. And where it is necessary, we have to use it, because the acrylic, also it's a question that, these cases need to look, because they are jewelry cases, they need to look absolutely crystal clear. Now, if you have a material which is which is prone to scratches and which is going to start degrading over a period of time, it beats the purpose of the case itself. You have sparkling diamonds and you have gold inside. It's all precious metal jewelry which you are showcasing. So you need to put that into a case which actually reflects the nature of the jewelry itself.
Does justice to the internal.
Yeah, and glass is like close to crystal in that sense. So the clarity is there, and the neatness of the product is very important in that case.
Cool. I would slightly now take the ply wala question which I wanted to ask you is what does ply as a material mean to you? Because at least my exposure, or when I was doing interview with Praveen Singh sir and Shrikant sir, we spoke about wood, and I just got a brief idea what the material is and how stronger bamboo as a material is. Similarly, if you can give some properties about ply, because this, obviously you've dealt with a lot of materials, but ply in specific, because I have a follow-up question on that.
So ply is actually in no way different from wood. No, it is processed wood. So you have like thin sheets of wood which are kind of laminated together, which are stuck together with a particular resin, bonded together to make it into a flat sheet. And then it becomes convenient to use. It becomes easy to kind of, make things out of it. If you take wood and you start shaping wood and doing things like that, of course, it's got its own processes and its own uses and its own beauty. But ply is it's a convenient material. You want to make some pieces of furniture, it becomes easy to cut, to put together, to screw down together, do all those kind of. And in the end, it is actually wood only. It's not in any way different from wood.
But the I don't know, maybe it's a very layman question, but it is perceived slightly low quality, is it? Or no?
I think at the end of the day, probably, we as designers need to have respect for all materials.
Yeah, that's why I said as a layperson, because I
don't think there's any such thing as a low grade material or a high grade material. There's something known as an appropriate material. Wow. And if you can make use of materials for their own sake, like for instance ply. I mean, a lot of people, you're right about that. The normal perception is that ply is a low grade material. Sure. But if you look at it like right from the time of Charles Eames, making bent ply furniture, okay, and that Charles Eames used ply, he bent the ply to make his furniture, and those are iconic designs today. I mean, it's like fantastic in that sense. So why should ply be treated as a low grade material is something which I think it's just that, there is an ignorance about how you can treat the ply. If you take ply for whatever it is and you treat it in a proper fashion, it has its own beauty. I mean, what you see on the surface of ply is basically the wood grains which are running through. That is what you will see in a wooden product also. You will see the wood grains on the surface. So what you perceive on the surface is exactly wood.
But yeah, there is some sort of a glaring difference between the texture and the feel and...
Sure there is.
Yeah.
Sure there is. But then, it's again, it's something like what you do with the ply and how you finish it, that becomes very important.
In terms of shelf life, is it lesser, or like what's the life of a ply, or it depends on the company, or it depends on how
I
it's
think it depends upon the grade of the ply.
Okay.
So if the ply is made from really good quality materials, I think, even, furniture made out of plywood is very easily good for maybe about 25, 30, maybe even 40 years. At my parents' place, we have some furniture which was made out of ply maybe in the 1960s.
Wow.
That is still existing today, and it still looks as good as ever. Of course, that ply had been covered over with a veneer, but essentially the material is ply itself, and it is not degraded, it is not given away in any way at all. But Kedar, I have there is a concern over here. It's also a question about how much people respect objects, which is also then related to the nature of the object itself and the way it has been made. Because if people start respecting objects, then they will start caring for them. They'll use them appropriately, and then the life of the object will go up much more. I mean, it's true for everything else.
Correct.
It's a question of, like if you have a car, how well do you maintain it? How much do you look after it? If you abuse it and misuse it, then obviously it'll give up on you. But if you don't give up on that object, then I think that object will give you service for a long, long time.
Correct. Yeah, actually, it could be a very naive question, but I was just making some furniture for my house, and I stumbled upon some teak wood. And the people who were selling those say, ये 150 साल पुराना है, ये 400 साल पुराना है. So does wood as a material in a longer run become seasoned, as we say, right? So what is does ply happen to do that sort of a thing, or is it processed? I just want to understand the nature of the material.
No, I don't think. I think there are two different things entirely. I think the wood is different and the ply is different. So wood has its own inbuilt, resin inside, which actually bonds it and holds it together. And when it's not something which can age indefinitely. In fact, the longer the wood ages, the weaker it becomes. Because the resin which is there, which is like the sap of the tree, or that kind of keeps on drying out over a period of time. And as it dries out, the wood becomes more and more brittle. Then it has a tendency then to start splintering and breaking away, and even cracking. So it's not as if somebody says it is 400 years old wood, so it's very good. Not necessarily so at all.
Okay.
Wood, I think what happens with wood is that if it is freshly cut, it is still, there's a lot of sap inside, and that tends to start drying out because it's no longer part of the growing tree, that it's kind of dead in that sense. So whatever it is, it starts drying out. That drying out process could cause it to warp. So that is why seasoning of the wood or allowing it to dry naturally kind of stabilizes the wood. And then it's good. It's good, but it's good for a period of time. I mean, it just cannot go on and on endlessly. Although, of course, there are, it also depends upon what is the size of the wood and the cross-section of the wood and what kind of wood and where it comes from. And it's a complicated material, wood. You need to really, work on it and understand it. And, it's not simple. Plywood is simple. Plywood has got a certain set of properties. Those properties kind of remain, they don't keep on altering. It is a rare issue that a good quality ply will start warping or, doing various things onto you. I have made some furniture out of, say, sal wood, which is easily available in our country. So freshly cut sal wood is a disaster. Because if you process that sal wood immediately and make some furniture, you will find that over a period of maybe a month and a half or 2 months also, it'll have warped, it'll have kind of twisted around, and it'll create all kinds of issues for you. Certain other woods are much more stable, like teak wood is probably a lot more stable. Rosewood is very stable. So, it depends. It depends upon the wood and how fresh it is and whether it's been aged or not, or,
How properly it is processed also. Maybe.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Sir, I wanted to ask you about Flexi-ply, because that's I was discussing with a lot of friends and it seemed to be a very old thing. And for me, it is very new. So if you can share some insights into that, and the chair which you made and other products which are made out of Flexi-ply. How different it is from a regular ply, or what is different?
So regular ply is basically made up of thin sheets of wood in which, every alternate layer has its grains in a direction perpendicular to the previous layer. Okay. That means the grains of every subsequent layer are not aligned. In Flexi-ply, they are aligned. So what happens is that it allows the ply to bend in one direction. Whereas your regular ply will not allow it to bend in either direction. Because, the grains are crossing each other on every subsequent layer. So I think that's about the only difference. The Flexi-ply basically just, again, it's an easy way of making bent plywood furniture. Whereas normally you would take a regular ply and go through steam bending, or you would, do your layering yourself. So you would take thin sheets like veneers, which you get, So you would take a veneer and wrap it around a kind of a surface, whatever the shape that you want, and then you would put another layer of it. You would put some glue or something between them, put another layer, clamp it together, then put a third layer, and so on and so forth, and create an entire piece out of that. Flexi-ply just makes it very, very easy and convenient for you.
But is there any threshold to bending? As in, are there any standard figures, or it again depends on what kind of ply it is manufactured?
No, there is a threshold, and that depends upon the thickness of the ply.
Okay.
So if you take like very thin ply, then you can probably bend it to a much greater degree. That is, the radius of the bend can be much smaller. But as the thickness keeps on going up, the radius of the bend keeps on increasing. You cannot bend it beyond a certain degree depending upon the thickness. So that, there is a constraint over there. However, you can overcome that constraint in a certain manner, depending upon how you configure your particular product or your piece of furniture. So in our case, when we were working with Flexi-ply, we wanted some really bends of very small radius. And we found that if we are using, say, about 12 mm thick ply, we could not do that. So we cut grooves on the surface of the ply at short intervals, and then bend the ply. What happens is that the ply where you groove it becomes weak.
Correct.
But then where you're bending it, if it does not really take that much of stress, then you're perfectly justified in bending it over there.
So for example, if it's a 12 mm thing, you groove it up to say 8 mm or 6 mm and then turn it.
Yeah, you can groove it to maybe about 4 mm, 5 mm deep.
Okay.
And at maybe at intervals of 6 to 8 mm. That also makes the piece of furniture interesting because it gives you a visual texture. So wherever the ply is bending, you'll see this series of grooves which are running along. So it kind of gives it an interesting texture. There was another reason also for us giving the grooves, which was that when we tried to, because what we are doing with this is we are cold bending it. There's nothing else that we are doing at it. So when you're bending it, the surface which is on top comes under tension.
On the outer side.
The outer side, the top layers come under tension, the bottom layers go into compression. It's typical structure that way. Like any kind of member which you bend, the top part of it goes into tension, the lower part goes into compression. So the top part which goes into tension has a tendency to crack. So there are very fine cracks which are developed on the surface of the ply, which becomes very difficult to finish. However, when you start grooving it and then bending it, the cracking starts happening where the groove is. It happens in the depth of the groove. And it kind of gets confined to the depth of the groove. So in effect, you don't see the cracks at all. So that gives it a much more, a better finished product. So grooving it actually gives us a dual purpose. One is that we are able to bend it easily along a narrower curvature, and secondly, we get a better surface finish. But all these things happen only once you start actually experimenting with the material.
Correct.
You know, so it's not just a question of saying that, okay, I'll take Flexi-ply and I'll bend it and that's it. We are done with it. We have achieved whatever we wanted. It's like you start working with it and then you start discovering all these things, then you try to figure out what is the way around it. So the thing about bending ply is also like, you know, this method of grooving it is quite an old process. I mean, many people have done it. A lot of designers have used it and done it. But, you know, achieving a specific purpose using that thing and also figuring out other issues like the cracking process and getting a better finish is something which happens once you start actually working with the material and you try to figure out, okay, what is the way around it and, you know, how can you resolve those particular issues.
And does it happen that, so if you're playing around with such small details, can this be mass manufactured also? Or it has to be like a single piece or like maybe 2 pieces or whatever?
That's a good question, Kedar. I guess if you set your mind to it, you can mass manufacture anything at all. You know, technology and processes are so advanced now that anything is, I mean, you can possibly definitely mass manufacture it. You know, you can. Whether it is suitable enough, whether there is sufficient, enough, whether the market kind of you know, allows you to do that or not is something that's a different question entirely. Also, the kind of resources which you would need to kind of achieve that kind of mass manufacturing process. Correct. Those are different questions. Those are commercial questions. But yes, it definitely can be mass manufactured. Why not?
Okay. So Aziz, I wanted to just move to slightly not so technical part of it. So in India, at least from what I have understood or what I have learned, is that people have a certain inclination towards wood. So maybe like teak wood or rosewood, as you said. So why do you think that has been the case? I mean, it's more like, yeah, it's just why do you think that has, first of all, like, do you also think like that in terms of not you particularly, but people generally incline towards wood as a material? Because at least from my exposure, if I see some Scandinavian furniture, there are a lot of metals and glass and other materials being used. In India, you see traditionally a lot of things which are done with wood. So why would that be the case?
It could be the case because
obviously, if you have some different perception or different
no, I agree with you. I think the issue about wood is a historical issue. I mean, from generations together, we have used wood as a material for building, for not only making houses and for construction, for furniture, for almost everything at all that you think about. Wood has been available and has been plentiful. It is embedded in our history. So obviously wood comes up all the time. The reason why people in India are still kind of hung up with wood is also because I think design has reached India quite late. I mean, what it did in the West, and it came a lot more earlier, and people started experimenting with different materials and use of these different materials. In India, it's come in quite late, but I think contemporary times, if you see, there is a whole lot of material which is being used in addition to wood, and people are getting more and more aware about issues about using wood and issues about conservation and deforestation and the ecological issues and things like that. So yeah, I mean, there are all these concerns which are there. But wood, yeah, I would definitely. I mean, it's something which is very much part of our being. I think it's part of our consciousness. It's been with us for so long that it's difficult to get it out of our system.
Yeah. So moving on with the same question, I would like to take a parallel because that's what I could connect with. So if you look at some fashion magazines or fashion TV or whatever, like things like that, right? There are certain dresses and certain costumes which are designed by designers which are like really premium, and you would never see those kind of things on the streets. But or maybe never see, or you can see in certain pockets of the city or certain parts of the world. Maybe some Bollywood celebrities are using those. So there's a transition of how that experimental work is coming down to the ordinary man. Similarly, I wanted to ask you that the kind of experiments designers like you do in their studios, playing with different materials, sometimes not feasible to mass manufacture or like get onto the streets, but there are certain high-end scientific studies which you do with other materials, right? So how does that come to the market? Is there any process? How has been your observation towards that? Has it really come down? If that makes sense.
I think, Kedar, at the end of the day, it's all a question of commerce here. It's all about how much does a product cost, and what kind of value is associated with it as far as the consumer is concerned. Because obviously you make a very, say you make a chair which is extremely comfortable, which kind of, is kind of, done in such a manner that depending upon who is sitting on it, what is the weight of the person, what is the posture of the person, it'll kind of align itself and give you the most comfortable seating position and things like that. And it's made of some very high-end materials, some alloys and some production process which is really complicated and all those kind of things. But it costs like tons and tons of money. Who the hell is going to buy it? It's just unaffordable. It might be a fantastic chair in that sense, but you can't market it commercially because the production costs are so high.
So what goes in the designer's mindset, as in to push those boundaries and to explore different things? Because as a designer, you always want people to use it, right? So
not necessarily. You might just be driven by the concern that I want to produce the most comfortable piece of furniture, the most comfortable chair in the world. And, there might be certain things which you might kind of, put together. You might research it. You might do things about it. It's the passion which drives you on. As long as you can afford to do it and you have the resources to do it and the passion drives you along, then you will go ahead and do it.
But there isn't any single stream or thread that it should reach masses because it's comfortable, everyone will have better lives?
Well, of course that concern is there.
Yeah, so
that concern is there all the time.
Yeah, but then how do designers balance, or how do you also balance this pushing of boundaries with respect to experimentation and yet making it viable for Aam Janta, if I can call it?
Yeah, I think that by and large the aim of most designers is to create products which can be used by people, which are affordable for people to use. It might be a one-off experiment that somebody goes into a direction where, it is basically research in that sense. No? And I don't think research should be stopped by any means. I mean, you never know where you will come across something which could actually, work perfectly well for people. So that, I mean, I really don't understand that question, Kedar, that, it's like all kinds of things. I mean, people do research in all kinds of topics, similarly people do research in design.
No, but that cascades in certain layers till it reaches the ordinary man. As per at least my understanding. So I'll give you another example which I recently stumbled upon. So there's a beautiful light made by Floss, which I really liked. And then when I went into actually Lakshmi Industrial Estate, I found at least 10 replicas of the same. Right. But I could clearly see the posture, the angle, the straightness, the aluminium, the quality, all being different. And I was asking, so that Floss light costs some 70 grand and this costs like 2,800.
Right.
But still that design has reached. But whoever is sensitive won't really buy that. Similarly, if you make a piece of furniture which has got that finish, that feel, which is not really tangible as such. So you want the exact thing to be in the market, right? But that may not be possible because of the kind of material you have used, the amount of investment that has gone into that one piece. So I just want to understand the transition. How does that come into the market? Does it always has to come as a copy, or maybe IKEA, the way they have done it, they intentionally design with something which can be affordable?
Yeah, so IKEA works with a specific brief, no? They want to make furniture which is affordable for the mass market. And they will design it only in that particular fashion. Whereas a high-end company like Floss might be looking for a lighting fixture which does something which is very specific. That's the intent of the designer then finally. What he or she wants to do with that object and how it has to be presented to the consumer. So it's a question of then what is the brief and what you're working with and who do you want to reach finally. So that's something which the designer has to question. I mean, the designer might say like Philip Stark made his citrus juicer, okay, which does not functionally, everybody knows that it doesn't work. Yeah. But it still works at a certain level as a sculptural object. And also because of the aura which is there around Philip Stark, that it's a Stark design object which you have in your house, So, so in that sense, I think it all depends upon from object to object and what is the brief and where do you want it to reach and who your final consumer is and what your concern is,
Yeah, that makes sense completely.
That's Kedar, like it's saying like then why make a Rolls Royce and why not just make nanos? You want a car which is grand and comfortable and is kind of upholstered very well and it's got the greatest kind of suspension and it runs fabulously and it's rugged and strong and everything, and then you can't say that okay, the Nano is a kind of watered down version of that. No, the Nano has its own set of concerns and the Rolls Royce has its own set of concerns.
Yeah, I think that answers. So I would like to conclude with one last question. Like, what do you think will be the dominant material in the coming decades? Again, now that I get where you're coming from, it makes sense that it again depends on the brief. But is there a pattern which you have seen in the coming time? And what could be the possible materials which designers will play with, should play with, can play with?
I don't know, Kedar. It's all a question of, material technology keeps on evolving all the time, yeah. People are researching and finding out new different kinds of material on a regular basis. I think...
no, but the way I said...
The predominant concerns are going to be more about, I think ecology. I think where we are headed in terms of energy use and, things like that. Maybe also, technology could also take us in directions which probably, we could be seeing something which goes from mass production to individual production. I mean, with technology like 3D printing and things like that, if say Kedar wants a particular object to be made in his own way, and he has some kind of a clue or a vision as to how he wants it, and if technology is available for you to kind of just put it together, then you will make your own objects. Then mass production will probably take a back seat, or mass production could be for certain kinds of objects only and not for certain other kinds of objects. So, it's kind of the way forward is kind of wide open. Technology will keep on evolving, and I think based on that, people will try figuring out their own, where they are headed and what they want to do with it. But it also brings us to a philosophical question, that finally at the end of the day, it's what will give human beings happiness. It's kind of difficult. There's a thought that says that if you can source everything within a certain limited radius of your existence, then that is probably raising your happiness quotient.
Oh wow!
So it's also about like say farming, or food. So if say within the vicinity of Bombay in a radius of say 50 kilometers, I get certain kind of fruits and certain kind of vegetables and certain kind of cereals, and I use those only. And then I'm not saying that I want apples from Australia and I want cherries from somewhere else and, whatever, So it's like, it's something like that, yeah. There's also this thing that, in a house, probably you need only a maximum of 250 objects. So people are hoarding and keeping all kinds of things and, they're doing all these. So all these different thoughts and processes are evolving. To what extent, we will keep on buying objects and more objects and more objects and discarding them and getting even more objects is something which is also, it's a personal kind of evolvement in that sense. Where do you want to go? And I think to me it seems that, if that actually happens, then the value of the objects will keep on increasing. The value and the respect for the object will keep on increasing. The throwaway culture which we are probably witnessing right now, which is leading to so much of waste and so much of, consumption is just going up and up and up. Now, people say that, okay, they become choosy about the objects. They want only certain specific kinds of objects, They don't want 50 different pairs of garments, and they don't want, 20 different pairs of shoes and things like that. Then probably, the concentration on that particular product will probably keep on increasing. And you'll find more and more value out of those objects.
And quality also.
Yeah. So I think, what is the way ahead? What is going to be the specific material? I can't even think that there's going to be one specific material. I think there are going to be many, many different kinds of materials. Depending upon how you have. I mean, look at the case of, say, bicycles. Bicycles have become so popular these days. But if you actually examine the kind of materials which are being used in bicycles, it's going from the very low basic to the extremely high tech. Frames are becoming lighter and stronger, and hubs are becoming more and more evolved, and there is titanium coming into it, and there are from the lowly steel tube bicycles which we used to have to something which is so sophisticated and something. So it's kind of difficult to predict where we are headed, but it's an exciting journey ahead, I think. Lots of things to look forward to.
Definitely. All right, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, a lot of things to be pondered upon, and I have to listen to this again to digest few of the things. And I really like the part where you said about it's the designer's choice eventually and the designer's brief also. So that's something. Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir, for giving us your time, and it was nice talking to you.
Thank you, Kedar. My pleasure.
Okay.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on Audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.